Good afternoon, and welcome to our Utah 4th Congressional District Candidate Forum on behalf of the Salt Lake Chamber. As you know, this is our one in our series of candidate forums that will be covering all of the major races here in Utah this fall. These will be held typically on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock, and you can find more information on these at saltlakechamber.com. My name is JC Skinner. I am the General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Policy here at the Salt Lake Chamber. And I'm joined today by my co-host and co-moderator, Clark Ivory, who is the CEO of Ivory Homes and a member of the Salt Lake Chamber Board of Directors. Clark, thanks for being here with us today, and I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much, JC. I think this is a great opportunity for the business community to weigh in and get some insights into these candidates. We're very interested in how they look at the business community and how the business community might be impacted by their direction and leadership. Each candidate today will get 30 minutes to respond to a series of questions that both candidates will be asked. This is sort of a nice way, JC, to approach this rather than letting people wrangle back and forth and interrupt one another. We have the opportunity today, of course, to hear first from Congressman Mcadams. He is our current 4th Congressional District representative, a native of West Bountiful. He went to the University of Utah, go Utes, but you'll notice he has a UVU mask on today. He's trying to cover all bases. And of course, later went to Columbia Law School. Mr. Mcadams and his wife, Julie, are parents of 4 kids, including 15-year-old twins. Big priority for him is access to health care, affordable prescriptions, and protecting children from online predators. He worked with both sides of the aisle to pass a modern trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, and is proud of that. Now we have an opportunity to just go to a very open-ended question for those who do not know you well enough yet. Ben, what could you tell us about you and why people ought to vote for you?
Well, thank you, JC. Thank you, Clark. It's great to be with you today. And it's great to be with Utah's business community. I am Utah's independent voice in Washington. As a member of the Congress working to represent Utah, or representing Utah's 4th Congressional District, my voting record shows that I am the most independent member of Utah's delegation and the number 2 most independent in the entire Congress, according to ratings by Congressional Quarterly. As such, I want people to know that I will always put Utah first. That I don't believe a representative is representative of any particular political party, but elected to represent a district. And that's what I've done. And people who know me know my track record as mayor of Salt Lake County and as a member of Congress is someone who will always prioritize public service and giving back to our state and back to our community. And that's what's important to me. I'm somebody who is also a bridge builder. I work across party lines to get things done. And I believe that there are good ideas on both sides of the aisle, in both Republican and Democrat. And I think there are bad ideas in both parties. And I don't hesitate to reach out and build coalitions to find solutions to our challenges. And I don't hesitate to stand alone if that's what's in the best interest of our state.
Thank you. Let's just start out with kind of the most obvious topic that the business community's been concerned with, and that's the economy. As we've been dealing with the circumstances of 2020 and the results of the COVID-19 crisis, we've seen varying impacts on the economy. Just the first question, what is your number 1 priority in Congress for that short-term economic recovery?
In the short term, we have to both slow the spread of this virus and support Utah's businesses and families that are in a pretty fragile condition right now. So first of all, one of the things that I think is lacking from Washington is a smart plan to slow the spread of the virus. We haven't seen, I believe, a cohesive plan, and that falls on Republicans and Democrats who have failed, I think, to develop a strategy to slow the spread of this virus. I think in Utah, we're lucky. We've had good leadership at the state level and with our mayors to slow the spread of the virus. And not to say that there are things we couldn't have, we might have done differently in retrospect, but I think we made good decisions that weren't motivated by politics, but were motivated by protecting Utahns and keeping us safe from this virus. Now, the virus is intertwined with our economy. We can't improve the economic situation in the short term without slowing the spread of the virus. But as the virus is still with us, And we are taking precautions to slow the spread, and each and every one of us to do our part to slow the spread of this virus. We also have to recognize that there are small businesses that are really struggling right now. So I supported the passage of the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, that helped many of our small businesses put money into the pockets of their employees so they can continue to work, continue to provide for their families, pay their rent or pay their mortgage, and put food on the table. I think that PPP program was a critical program that stabilized businesses and helped them to get through in the short term. I also supported the economic impact payments. These were the payments of $1,200 that went to individuals earning $75,000 or less. And I believe that was a critical lifeline that in the early days of this pandemic helped us to push through and get through. And I have been out visiting many of our businesses, and I hear from our businesses on a regular basis about how much that PPP made a difference to them being able to keep their doors open and really to keep the connective fiber of our economy strong so that we could push through. And many of them are struggling though today. Those PPP funds are gone, and they're worried about their ability to survive over the next several months. So Congress needs to come together, Republicans and Democrats, to pass additional measures to move us forward and to stabilize our economy. And I've been disappointed that we haven't seen early on with the CARES Act and some of that legislation, we saw Republicans and Democrats working together to get things done. Over the summer, it became much more partisan, and that's disappointing. I stand with my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, in calling on leadership in the House and in the Senate from both parties to get back to the negotiating table, to get a package agreed upon and put it on the table, something that can get the support of the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, and get on the president's desk for signatures.
Just to put in a plug for the chamber, I think they did a great job of helping small businesses throughout the state apply for the PPP. A lot of businesses that wouldn't have known how to do it. And the University of Utah jumped in and gave a big helping hand as well. So we were one of the top states for that.
Yeah, Utah per capita really punched above our weight as far as helping our businesses.
I think that's one of the reasons we're in such good shape right now.
Yeah.
Just moving on, the students in Utah have really sort of taken it, taken a big hit as well. And we think about the digital divide. Not all schools and not all kids that are at home have access to internet, have access to the right kind of hardware that they need. And they're unable to connect right now and learn, and it's creating big problems, but it's also a big problem going forward, even when we don't have the pandemic. What are your thoughts on whether government should be involved in helping, get over this digital divide?
This pandemic has laid bare many of the disparities in society on so many fronts. But you're right that access to technology, the digital divide, has been one of those where we see that not all students have an equal shot at opportunity. And one of the things I think makes Utah great is we recognize that we want to make sure that there's an open door for every student if they will put forth the effort to stand up and walk through it. And but sometimes students will find a door is shut. And in spite of their best efforts, they're not going to be able to walk through that door. And the pandemic, the digital divide, is one of those closed doors for many students. I'm supporting legislation, the broadband access, a broadband access bill that works with the private sector. It's public and private partnerships to expand these opportunities. What this one does is it provides some critical funding to help to rehab technology that can be, a lot of students lack devices. I look at our own family. We have 4 kids in our public school system. My wife and I are both now working from home primarily. And, we had a family computer, but all of a sudden that wasn't enough. And we had to have 4 kids who were online, and we had to have broadband that was sufficient for all 6 of us to be streaming at the same time. And it took us a little while to figure it out. We have figured it out, but so many students are being left behind. So I think there's a role for the private sector, there's a role for philanthropy, and there's a role for government to make sure that resources are available so kids can access the technology, the hardware that they need, and then expanding broadband access has got to be critical. And overall, but especially in this pandemic, we've seen how critical that is.
Thank you. I want to shift to the topic of healthcare. That's been a central focus of your campaign. I think you probably know about 60% of Utahns receive their health insurance from their employers, and that constitutes one of the second highest expenses for, or one of the highest expenses for employers after their wages. With with healthcare expenses going up and becoming a greater and greater concern, what is your priority in Congress? What can Congress do to help keep these costs down and to help address the issue?
Well, we have a healthcare system here in the United States that in many ways is the envy of the world. But I also, as I say that, I also recognize that there are some gaps in that system. There are far too many people who fall through those gaps and are not able to access healthcare or have access to affordable healthcare. And we do see the costs rising, that it's becoming increasing share of an individual or family's discretionary income, and to the point that it's competing with ability to pay rent or to pay a mortgage. And housing is another issue, but housing prices are going up, and people having to choose between healthcare, prescription drugs, housing, and food. And I don't think anybody should ever be required to make that choice. So a few things that I'm working on. First is lowering the cost of prescription drugs. And that's several folds. I've supported and we've passed legislation to expand access to generics. Intermountain Healthcare here in Utah has been a pioneer in also from the private sector side, expanding access to generics, that people can get those drugs at a fraction of the price because they're no longer subject to the patents and name brands, so they can access lower price prescription drugs. But bringing generics to the market quicker that can lower the cost of prescription drugs, and then capping seniors out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs is another effort that I'm supporting. One of the things that for me I think is critical, and I hear it from so many Utahns, and that is keeping in place protections for individuals with a pre-existing condition. Remember, my family lives here in Utah, so I usually work all week in DC and catch the flight back and be here for the weekend with my family. And one Friday night, as I was waiting to catch my flight, an individual came up to me and he told me that he appreciated my work to protect people with pre-existing conditions because he had a pre-existing condition. He said he had a form of cancer that is manageable, and with the right medications, he says he should live another 20 years. But his medication costs him thousands of dollars a month. And he said, fortunately, at his employer, he has good health care, but he is afraid of the day that he may be laid off from his employer, lose his job, and be uninsurable. And if that's the case, he says, that would be a death sentence to me. And so he asked me to continue fighting to protect him with his pre-existing condition, his access to health care. So protecting people with pre-existing conditions is a priority of mine. Now that's easier said than done. And you can't just say we're gonna protect them without policies in place that allow plans to be affordable and to cover people with those pre-existing conditions. And so for me, we have a kind of a three-pronged approach to healthcare in the US that, as I said, I think works with some gaps that we need to work to fill. And that is, we have the private healthcare funded through employment-based, and that seems to work for a lot of people, and many Americans receive their coverage through private insurance and employer-based insurance, and I support that. I do not support taking away anyone's private health insurance plan. I think that's an important part of our healthcare delivery system in the United States. The second prong of healthcare is Medicare and Medicaid, that funds people who maybe don't fit into the traditional mold. They may not have a job because of a lack of a job. They're low income or seniors and they're retired. And so, and they oftentimes have higher health needs. And so Medicare and Medicaid fit a certain segment of the population who might not otherwise find healthcare in other places. And then we have the exchanges, and the exchanges are so people can purchase private plans on the market. And I think that's a concept that is warranted and valuable today, but needs some work. Healthcare plans on the exchange right now are expensive, and they don't always provide the highest level of quality. So working to improve those three prongs of healthcare is my priority, to make sure that no one falls through the cracks and that we continue to expand access to healthcare and bring down the cost.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to move to another topic, and that is, currently in our system, we find so much divisiveness, rancor. You know, it's just a difficult time, I'm sure, to be a politician, but it's difficult on all of us. We have to watch all of your terrible ads. And as you think about it, and it's from both sides, this is becoming sort of a system that very few people are going to want to be involved in. What are we going to do to turn that around? how is it that America is going to get this two-party system to work in a way that moderates and ends up bringing together and unifies, on important issues instead of continually polarizing one another and getting further and further away from agreement?
We live in one of the best countries in the world, and our country has done amazing things, and we have solved problems that have plagued humanity for millennia. And we should be proud of what we've accomplished in this country. But I don't think right now Washington is living up to our rich and noble history. And we have to fix what's broken about Washington. I think, first of all, fixing what's broken about Washington starts with electing people who are committed to fixing it, who believe that we can work across the aisle, that there are good ideas with people. You may recognize there are people who you disagree with, but they have good ideas and valuable perspective, and you can learn from somebody who's different than you. I always try to see and listen to somebody else's concerns and their ideas and ask myself what I can learn from them. When I got to Washington with a commitment of fixing what's broken about Washington, one of the first things I did was join a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. So the Problem Solvers Caucus is comprised of equal number Republican and Democrat. In fact, to join, you have to team up with somebody from the opposite party and join together. We call it Noah's Ark style, so 2 by 2. And I joined the Problem Solvers Caucus. There are 25 Republicans and 25 Democrats, and we meet on a regular basis to talk about legislation, both large and small bills, majorly significant bills like COVID relief or healthcare reform or immigration reform, and stuff that is a little bit more focused, that issues that I'm working on, for example. And we have been able to break the logjam on some things and not others, but in that process of working to break the logjam in Washington, what's happened is you get to know people who come from different parts of this country, have different life experiences, different perspectives, different political ideas, and you learn that they're good people. They love this country, and we are working to make this country a better place. And I think if you can start from understanding that our values and priorities are the same, we all want to create better opportunities and a better country for our kids, but that's the first step to, we may disagree on how to do that, but that's the first step to building common ground. And
that leads me to ask you one other question, and that is, what do you appreciate most about your opponent, Burgess Owens?
Well, thank you. I don't know Mr. Owens, although he seems like a nice individual. People who know him say he's a very great person, so I look forward to getting to know him. For me, it seems like Burgess Owens is a person of deep conviction and deep faith, and I respect that about him. I think that to do this job, it takes a conviction and strength, and I think that's something we both share. As a person of faith myself, I think it's important for our representatives to have a conviction that can come from faith, it can come from other areas, but as a person of faith myself, that's a conviction that motivates me to serve and to give back to our community and to our state. And I think Mr. Owens has that same conviction.
Thank you.
I think we've all learned a lot this year about a lot of different topics, but one of those has been dealing with the fallout of some of the not very pretty parts of our history, and dealing with issues of recognizing where we failed with issues of diversity and inclusion in our state and across the country. Here at the Chamber, it's something that we've been very focused on. We've been very much working with our members and our community to try to help address that issue. But what can you do, and what should Congress do to help ensure that Utah is viewed and is a more equitable place?
Well, I want to thank, first of all, the Salt Lake Chamber, who has done so much in that regard. And we as a country certainly have more we can do. And there are people who still today feel left behind. And we should work to make this country, a fair place for everyone, that the doors are open when people will stand up and walk through them, that those doors are open for them. One of my first opportunities to work alongside the Salt Lake Chamber goes back some 10 years when we were looking at the topic of immigration reform and crafting the Utah Compact. And I was proud to be one of 5 people who helped to draft the principles of the Utah Compact. And I'm proud to see my signature on the front page of that document, along with other community leaders who have worked to chart a different course for Utah. And so often people, when they hear that I'm from Utah, want to ask me why Utah is so different. And we are a state and a people that come together. We recognize that that we can learn from people from different countries and different backgrounds and different life experiences. And we find a place that we call it the Utah way, or Utah's secret sauce. And we have come together to find the best in us. Moving forward is when I was mayor, working with the Salt Lake Chamber on our welcoming Salt Lake and our welcoming plan. And I was joined Derek Miller as we signed Salt Lake County to become the first welcoming county in the United States. And that was not only a great term, but a platform of how we're going to move forward to help new Americans who to find the best opportunities that we all enjoy, and help to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity at success. And I think today, I reflect on one of our community leaders, Russell M. Nelson, who over the weekend spoke about the importance of being leaders in eliminating racism and discrimination in our country. And I think in order to do that, it's going to require all of us to be at the table constructively, peacefully, talking through the ideas, understanding and listening where people feel left behind, and finding ways to move forward and to make sure that everybody feels included and treated fairly and equally by their government. And I think we've come a long way as a country. We have more that we can accomplish. I just want to say in conclusion that while I think this is such an important conversation, and I'm happy to see this conversation happening, this conversation, I support peaceful and means of moving forward that conversation, and violence and vandalism is never the answer.
That's great. We want to talk to you a little bit about Utah and how you're able to represent Utah. As you know, we're one of the leading economies in the United States, and a lot of people are looking to us now more than ever before. It's very important that we have representatives in Congress that can amplify our voice and also help us attract additional opportunities to our state. Talk to us about your ability to help us do that, both amplify our voice and also attract opportunity.
Well, I am somebody who, in my public service, always works to build bridges and to work with people to get things done. And sometimes people say that I'm boring in that sense, that I really like infrastructure and problem solving and really getting into the weeds of policy. I love that, and I love to work with people who are also interested in problem solving and policy making. And I want to look to no further than our own Governor Herbert, who I think brings the same spirit of get it done and working with whoever's willing to be at the table to do so. And I had the honor of working with him when I was a state senator, when I was mayor of Salt Lake County, when we worked on issues like homelessness and addressing opioid crisis and addiction. And now as a member of Congress, there's probably not a week that goes by that me or my staff is not in contact with the governor's office talking about Utah's priorities and what he wants to see from Washington. And that includes things like infrastructure and water and the things that are really important, I think, to the strong economy that we have here has to be built on a solid foundation. And we have to continue to make sure that that foundation is maintained consistently. And that takes work. And it's not always the most exciting work. It doesn't land me on the Rachel Maddow show or Fox News, but it's important work to continue to preserve the strong foundation that our great economy is built upon.
Thank you. I want to move to housing affordability, and we've had conversations about this topic before, but as you know, Utah suffers from one of the greatest housing shortages and crises of affordability in the West. Our members have become increasingly concerned with the ability of their employees to find affordable housing near their places of employment. Does the federal government have a role in helping to address housing affordability? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, I think the federal government does have a role in addressing housing affordability. I think the solution, part of the reason it's a difficult challenge is because the solution, there's no single entity that can solve this problem. And the problem is a tough one, and it's getting worse in Utah. And I look to the studies from the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute that forecast where housing affordability is going in this state. And the problem's going to get worse unless we intervene to try and address it and make sure that there's accessible housing. And I'll tell you what I want. I have my 15-year-old twins and a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I want them to be able to come over for dinner on Sunday and not have to live out of state for career opportunities or to find a place where they can buy a home. And don't want them having to drive 3 hours to come over on a Sunday afternoon. I think that's something that all of us would like to see. And so, you know, as we look at it at the federal level, I think what we can do at the federal level is make sure that financing is available, that people can get approved for and purchase a home. I think protecting a mortgage deduction that allows home ownership to be the dream and the possibility for every American family if they want to do so, and then protecting some of the efforts that we have for even affordable rental housing is also important for people who, for whom that's a desired or necessary approach. And then I think it actually is more than just housing. So you talk about it, I think I really appreciate how you framed it, because yes, it's about affordable housing, but it's also about housing that is in close proximity to a job. Now, we can have affordable housing if people are willing to drive further and further to work, but we're already getting to the point that people, you know, people's commutes are getting pretty lengthy here and going to get longer. And so part of the solution, yes, is interventions to support affordable housing, but I'm talking to my colleagues about we can't always just put more money at it. The problem will get bigger and there's not going to be enough money to fully solve it. It's also about thinking about our transportation systems and our economic systems. So it's about putting jobs where people are. So thinking about where we do our economic development. And I think we've started to figure out that here in Utah with our Wasatch Choice for 2040 and job centers. And you're seeing jobs located at the point of the mountain, the Silicon Slopes area as a job center, and looking for further job centers throughout the state, these nodes where they can have housing close to jobs, but then also thinking about our transportation system. So it's things like making sure that our transportation is built in a thoughtful way that maximizes transit-oriented development, that we can have density around our transit stops that allow people to have housing choices. There are times in life that all of us may want a yard and times that we may not want a yard. And so allowing housing choices that think through our transportation so that it facilitates different types of housing to serve different clientele.
Fantastic. Now we're going to bang through some questions really quick because we have less than, we have about 4 minutes left.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a few of these, JC, and then I'll pass it back to you. You mentioned the Utah Compact, and obviously the chamber was at the heart of that. Immigration is broken. That was almost 20 years ago that we were working on that, and yet nothing has really happened since. How are we going to solve that problem quickly? What is the answer?
I support comprehensive immigration reform. That hasn't moved forward, so we're starting to take a piecemeal approach. So I voted to provide a pathway for legal status for Dreamers, to address the H-1B, the high-tech visa worker program. And I'm working on legislation right now with a Republican colleague, John Katko, to look at immigrants who have come here, but are working in areas where their skills, they have higher skills than what they're doing. They may be working as a taxi driver, but they're a dentist. And
thank you. Moving on, minimum wage. Do you support a raising of the minimum wage?
I do support raising the minimum wage. I voted against the minimum wage bill that passed Congress last year. There was a $15 an hour nationwide minimum wage. I think we need to recognize that what works in New York City, or a wage that works in New York City, is maybe not right for Utah. So I think we should look at cost of living and other factors and have a regional approach, not a nationwide approach.
All right. The deficits, both under our past president and our current president, we've seen an escalating deficit. What are we going to do about that? How big a deal is it?
Well, I think the only party that cares about the deficit is the party that's in the minority. And once they come in the majority, they no longer care about the deficit or debt, and that is wrong. So the first bill I introduced when I got to Congress was legislation to amend the Constitution and require a balanced budget, because the debt that we are passing on to future generations, and both parties are to blame, is inexcusable. We have to do better.
I'm going to ask you kind of a combined question here and let you sum up at the same time. So just in general, when we're talking about Congress and congressional members, what should the voters be looking for as a qualification for their representative in Congress? And then we'll give you the rest of the time to kind of leave us with your parting words.
Okay, thank you. Look, I think we live in divided times in this country, and I think that that division is really getting exhausting. I would love to go a week and not know the latest fights out of Washington and not follow it. And I think, you know, what we expect, when I was mayor of Salt Lake County, I would tell our county employees that if we were doing our jobs well, people didn't know what we were doing. They don't want to know they just want to show up on a Saturday morning and know that the grass was cut and their kids could play soccer and the rec center was clean and working. and they didn't want to think about us. And I think we need to get back to the point where we have people who are working to heal the divide and bridge the controversy in this country and bring us together. We have real challenges that we're facing: a rising cost of healthcare, the rising cost of housing, cost of prescription drugs, a pandemic that is wreaking havoc on the health and safety of far too many Americans and frontline workers, and taking a real toll on their economy. Unemployment is high, and people are worried about their ability to keep their businesses afloat and keep their pay their rent and pay their mortgage. And so we have real challenges that need to be solved. And so I hope that voters are, there are two different types of people that you can choose to elect. You can elect people who are going to be the best champion for your position and go to battle against the other party or against other members of Congress. And you can look for people who are going to maybe look to extend a hand of friendship to try to bridge the divide and recognize that at the end of the day, we are all Americans, and we have so much more in common than what divides us. And I choose to be somebody who's not going to call names and not going to point fingers, but work to see the best in somebody else, to try to understand why their perspective is different than mine, what I might learn from somebody else. And I'm a listener. And I think in Washington, we need more people willing to listen, to see the best in others, and to bridge our differences to solve the challenges, the serious challenges that we face as a country.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. We know your time is valuable, and we're really grateful that you chose to spend some of it with us. We're going to excuse you now, and for our viewers, we're going to fade the screen for just a moment as we bring in our next candidate. So we will be with you momentarily. Thank you again, Representative.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, we're back and we're ready to go. Welcome this afternoon. It's nice to have you with us.
Same here. Looking forward to it for sure.
As you know, this is the home of the Salt Lake Chamber, the voice of business in Utah. And it's very important today that we have an opportunity to ask you questions about how the business community might be impacted by this race and by, your position going forward. We're interested to hear your insights, and we're going to get right into it. I want to give a little bit of an introduction about you. Burgess Owens is a Republican candidate in the 4th District. Mr. Owens played football at the University of Miami. Very good football team. Earned his Bachelor of Science degree in biology and chemistry. That's good stuff. And then, of course, we want to point out that you do hold an Orange Bowl Ring of Honor. That's terrific. And played in the NFL for the Jets and the Oakland Raiders, where in 1980 you picked up a ring. It looks like, huh? It's pretty exciting.
Back when the Raiders used to win football games a while back.
That's exciting. You've lived in Utah for about 8 years, I understand, and you've spent a lot of time mentoring youth. You founded Second Chance for Youth, a Utah-based nonprofit dedicated to helping troubled and incarcerated youth. I think we're just going to jump right into one of our first questions. For those who don't know you well enough here in the state, help us to just understand a little bit about what motivates you, why you wanted to run for this office, why you want to represent Utah.
Okay, it's a good start. First of all, let me have everybody know where to find out more about me, a little bit of my background, and some of the questions you're asking is there too. It's called burgessforutah.com. burgessforutah.com. So please check me out there and you'll get some of these answers. I was very fortunate to grow up in the Deep South in the 60s, days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. And I say fortunate because the community I grew up in had the same values that we have here. They believed in education, believed in faith. Entrepreneurship was everywhere. And the family unit was really our core value. That's where our core commitments were. And out of that, anytime you find those components together, you find an environment or a person who's literally one generation away from being part of the middle class. It happened with my parents. It happened with my great-great-grandfather that came across as a slave. Those tenets are true no matter what culture, what race, what person comes here, how they come here. I saw that happen, and I recognized during that time, I was really blessed to have been in the 60s when the Black community, because of those tenets, led our country to growth of the middle class, men matriculated from college, men committed to marriage, and a percentage of entrepreneurs, over 40%. That entrepreneur base led to a community across our country of 50 to 60% of Black Americans in the 60s being part of the middle class. So I know what it is. It's not hypothetical to me what makes our country work and what the values are that really drives us. I'm here in Utah because I was drawn here. I sent my kids here to go to college because of the values, and I followed them here because of the values. And I'm committed to never let what happened to my community in the 60s happen to our country or to Utah. We need to fight for these values. Utah, matter of fact, is a place that I think is really a pioneer state in terms of so many different things. But the fact we have over 277,000 business owners, 90% are small business owners, creates a middle class that's very, very attractive. That's where you have things like empathy, vision, the desire to have a legacy to pass on. Those are the things that really continue to have our country as a magnet for the rest of the world and allows Utah to be the same. So the reason why I'm doing this, as I realized about a year or so ago, working with my kids, the kids that are coming out of the juvenile system, that if we don't change the house, our kids don't have a chance. Because it's all about policies. It's in policies that allow them not to be educated, policies that allow them not to understand the free market system, policies that allows them to not have jobs. So those are the things that I've been really passionate about, and I think getting this house back will allow us to start moving that direction.
Thanks, Mr. Owens. We need to move on with some other questions.
Thank you. We want to start with, as you can imagine, one of the most important issues to the business community, and that's our current economic state. As a member of Congress, what would your number one priority for the short-term economic recovery of this country be?
We're seeing that already with what our president's been doing with the deregulations and tax cuts. I understand our country just came through at the beginning of the year, the lowest unemployment in the history of our country for Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women, veterans, 40% increase. And first of all, business ownership was going up across the roof throughout the country, but Black business ownership over 400% increase in 2 years. That is what drives our country. We need to get back to that. Let's make sure that we continue to lower the regulations to allow the cost that regulation does and that goes to the consumer, not to go to consumer. We had over $3,100 per family in savings just because of deregulation. So that's one of the first things I'll do to kickstart it. Obviously, we need to make sure that we allow some of the decisions for business owners to open their businesses. They understand what it is to have a customer come in, feel safe, and come back again, as opposed to someone who's never run a business before, which unfortunately we have too much of that going on in our country right now.
One of the big challenges we have here locally right now and throughout the United States is we've got a lot of kids at home who are unable to connect digitally to their schools. You know, there are some affluent areas where they've got all the computers and access to Wi-Fi that they could need, but many others don't. What is the role of government in helping to get across this digital divide? What are we going to do to bring the masses into the modern world?
Very good question. First of all, ignorant and free can never be. A country stays free because we're an educated people. We're now, I'll say the new civil rights is make sure that every child, no matter what zip code they live in, what part of the country they live in, gets a quality education. And the internet, we're finding out that this is essential. We have here in the urban areas, 25% of the kids do not have, it's available but not affordable in the urban communities. In the rural communities, it's just not available. You have places down south where literally cars are lined up around the school property because there's a bus with a hotspot on it. We can't allow that to continue to happen.
Are you in favor of investing more taxpayer dollars in this area to help bring us forward in education?
I think there's a couple of things, yes. Again, I look at this as being the new civil rights. I think that we have to understand as a empathetic people that even though our kids might be educated, if we're working with kids across the country or not, our children have to deal with that at some point. I think what we did, how we handled the COVID is a government free market partnership that literally allowed it through warp speed to bring a vaccination that's going to be coming to us pretty soon. That's what we need to look at these issues, whether it be with our broadband. There has to be a way in which we can collaborate as business owners and with the government to figure out a way to make sure that everyone is getting this kind of education. It's investment we have to put into our kids for sure.
Thank you. I want to shift topics and talk a little bit about healthcare. And your campaign is focused a lot on the importance of healthcare. In Utah, a large number of our citizens receive their insurance, from their employers.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest costs for employers next to wages is actually providing health insurance. But those costs continue to increase. As a representative of Utah in Congress, what would you do? What would be your focus? And what would be your priorities on the cost of healthcare and access to healthcare?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to what I said a minute ago. We now have an example of what can happen when our country puts its focus on finding solution, and not just with the government, but as free market. We have a position now where things like pre-existing conditions, we can all agree needs to be put in place. I'm a prostate cancer survivor. I know what it is to have to deal with that issue. Those things right now, thank goodness, are being taken off the plate because both Democrats and Republicans, matter of fact, President Trump just recently put together an executive order, making sure that that'll be part of anything moving forward. So those are the kind of things we can come together when we really put our focus on those folks we're trying to help. We need to make sure that we do not go the route of the Obamacare, in which you put so much power in the hands of bureaucrats that literally people are paying for things that they don't need. The cost was going up to where we actually, I think the process will get to look at some point towards single payer, which we cannot do that. So we have to make sure we have a free market approach to healthcare, that we have competition and transparency. Transparency seems so natural. I mean, who goes to McDonald's and gets a bill later for their Big Mac or their fry? No, they pay for it at that point because they know that's what they want to get at that point. They can afford to do that. Why should not we look at healthcare the exact same way we look at the free market? We go to our store because we feel safe, or we feel the value of the product is good, or the cost is best. We should have the same options when it comes down to our healthcare system. It's a different way of thinking, but I think the COVID has given us a chance and as president to have a paradigm shift in terms of how we approach things that we haven't in the past.
Let's talk for a minute about the polarization of the whole political system. You know, it seems like we've got more rancor and more divisiveness than ever. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it seems like it's reaching sort of a crescendo. Even watching your television ads and those of your opponents, they're not exactly the most friendly ads. You think about that. What is it we're going to do in America? Does the two-party system work? How can we bring our country together? What is it that is going to bring us to moderate and get stuff done? What
a good question. First of all, burgessforutah.com, the facts. Make sure those who want to hear the facts, they can get to the truth. You know, what I love about our nation is that we go through our tough times, that's when we kind of come back and we begin to talk in a way we haven't talked before. You know, I look at our toughest times, Pearl Harbor, 9/11. This last year has been a big hit for us. But we're now having conversations that we have not had literally for a couple of years. We're now talking about where should the power be when it comes down to running a business, going to church, putting our kids in school. How much power should we give a governor to shut down everything he wants to? I think the greatest thing we have going as a people is the concept of we the people. When we're talking, no matter even if we're on different sides of the aisle, those of us who love our country have the same end game. And we can agree. You guys remember the days we just used to say we can agree to disagree? But we need to get back to that, because if we love our country enough and we have a confidence in our way of thinking and conversing and articulating ourselves, we can agree to disagree to get to that same end game. The other part of it is that we've been under attack for a long, long time. You know, our country's been based on the Judeo-Christian values from its very beginning. We've not been a perfect country, but we're the best out there because we're the best at looking at each other from inside out versus outside in, because of our faith. At the same time, we have to understand there's evil out there. There's an ideology that hates everything that our country is all about. We've been fighting in wars in our past. We're now just happen to be fighting it within our country with ideologies. And so we now can talk about things like education, which is a tenet. Should we give every person an opportunity to have the ability to think outside their boundaries and to have faith that this country can move forward? Faith. I mean, this is a country built on faith, and there's an ideology that hates our faith. They hate the fact that we believe in a God. So we have to understand that. And in industry, we are fighting for our middle class right now. Our middle class is what makes us so unique. It's a place because it's powered by the business owner. We have empathy, vision, compassion, patience. You know, we're the people that, as you come into our store with a bad day, the goal is to make sure you leave with a good day, so you come back again the next day. That's who we are. And so we have to make sure we're fighting for that and knowing, in a sense, that's really what's at stake in this.
Let me ask you one of those good day kind of questions. Your opponent, Congressman Mcadams, what do you think about him? Would you tell us just maybe one attribute that you really do appreciate about Congressman Mcadams? I
think he's very loyal to his ideology. And when I say that, you know, Ben has been able to vote for 85% for Nancy Pelosi. That's a very consistent process. So I'll say loyalty is something we should all look for. I'm very loyal to my ideology. I'm very loyal to the concept of free market capitalism.
So is that the best thing you see in Ben?
Well, loyalty is a good thing. Just have to make sure what we're loyal to. So no, I think it's a very fair one. I'm
just looking for something a little bit more sincere, not so much of a debate point to be made, but tell me of a quality in him that you really appreciate.
Well, I haven't had a chance to really know Ben, meet him. What I've heard throughout people I've met, he's a good guy. And so I don't doubt that whatsoever. I will say this, that we're in times right now that we need more than that. And we need warriors. Someone who understands that we're truly at war at this point. And that's why I feel my history of growing up in the days where literally, if you remember the movie, Remember the Titans, that was kind of my high school experience at 16 years old. So I know what it is to go through that process. I was the third Black American to go to University of Miami back in the days where they weren't winning a lot of football games, by the way. It wasn't the year we think of today. But that experience allows me to understand what it is to run at fear, run at the obstacles. It's a natural process. And when you do that and understand that, that's what we're trying to go through right now. We have a lot, our country's going through a lot. And we need to be able to run toward the values that we believe in and fight very, very diligently, and not pull back, not apologize, but say, this is what made us great. Meritocracy, looking at each other from inside out, and second chances. That's who we are. And I'm very willing to fight very hard to make sure that stays the case.
So as you just mentioned, our country's been going through a lot. This year has been one unlike anything else. One of the things that it has forced us to look at is our history of racial and social injustice. And you've mentioned experiencing much of that. That's something that here at the Chamber, we've been very focused on. And how can our members help decrease those divides? How can we help to be more inclusive? How can we really adjust those things here in the state of Utah? How will you, as a member of Congress and as a citizen of the state of Utah, help us do that? What can you do to help?
Well, I'll start off by being honest. We need to know history. It was Karl Marx who said the first battleground is the writing of history. If we know our history, guys, we can be nothing but proud of our background, appreciate where we are today, and it gives us a vision of where we need to go in the future. I came through a time in the 60s, 50 years ago, that having this kind of conversation we're having right now would not have happened. My first year in the NFL, in 1973, there were no black quarterbacks, centers, middle linebackers, or free safeties. Those were thinking positions. We need to be honest about the fact that we are not a perfect nation. We never have and never will be until Christ comes back. But at the same time, we've been better than anybody else out there. So to say we have systemic racism is not true, period. And we need to be honest enough and have the courage to say that to people who come up and talk about privilege. The privilege we have is being an American and being able to work through any obstacle we can if we have the right attitude. That's the privilege. The privilege is being a mom or dad that truly understands your responsibility is to make sure those kids grow up in a safe environment with hope in our future. The worst thing we can do as Americans is give our kids hopelessness. And when we don't stand for our flag, we don't stand for the national anthem, if men don't commit to their family and really show what it is to man up, we're giving our kids hopelessness. And I will not stand by and let that happen. I'll say this for Utah. There's no state in the union that does it better than Utah. Why? Because we're a state of service. We're the culture that does something that no one else does. We raise our kids and we're excited when they go for 2 years to some place that nobody else wants to visit. And then we just can't wait for them to go and come back because we know that they're learning something about life. We're a country, we're a state of entrepreneurs. We think outside the box like no one else. Coming from the corporate environment, I know what it is to be in a place where people from Utah are respected because those who are hiring them know that they understand work ethic, they understand education. So let's be proud of who we are. Don't let anyone tell us that we're racist because we're white. And as a black person, don't let anybody tell me that I should be angry because you're white. That is the worst thing that can happen in our country. I grew up in the 60s when that was prevalent. We don't need to be racist, guys. We're way past that. Let's be proud of who we are and stand up against those who tell us that we're not the good people that we are, the good-hearted people we are.
Utah is one of the country's leading economies right now, and part of that is because of how things have been managed here with COVID, but we had tremendous momentum before we came into this year. And as you think about it, this allows us to sort of punch above our weight back in Washington, D.C. Hopefully people are ready to take note, and people are looking at opportunities to even look at Utah to grow their business or to expand. Talk to us a little bit about your ability to amplify the voice of Utah in Washington, D.C., your ability to help us attract new opportunity and business. Do you think you have the experience base that can get that done?
Absolutely, and I'm gonna lean a little bit back on a team I played with that you might remember. A lot of the young people don't. It was the Raiders when they used to win football games a lot. It was also a team known for being underdogs, the team of last chances. What I loved about that experience I had was that to be in a place where we can literally see a selflessness in terms of what the end game was. That selflessness was this: it's not about me, it's about the team and winning this next game. So that I remember as a free safety, my thought was I don't want to be the weak link. I knew everybody else would do their job. I didn't want to be the one that failed the team. I think that's what we have here in Utah. We have a really good group of delegates. We really do. Those who represent us with the same values. Might not be exactly the same on every way that we look at an end game, but our end game is to make sure the state of Utah is represented well and our country moves forward. So I think I can bring a lot to that because like those that I will be part of the Congress with, they love the country, God, family, country, family, respect of women and authority. That's what makes us who we are. I will be grateful to be part of that contingency, to say the least.
We're going to shift topics again to the topic of housing. Utah, while we do so many things really well, and not that we're not doing this well, but we suffer from one of the greatest housing shortages and crises of housing affordability in the West. Our members are increasingly concerned about this, as you can imagine, as they're trying to attract talent to the state. We need to be a place where people can actually afford to live, and we also want to make sure that they can live near the places that they're working. Does Congress have a role in addressing issues of housing affordability? And if so, what would you exactly
Absolutely. I think federal and state can work together. There's a couple of things. First of all, my 6 kids miracle of all miracles. Starting off in Philadelphia, all here in District 4. 2 just bought homes recently, and 16 grandkids. So I'm totally with Utahns who want to make sure their family stays here forever. And what that comes down to, let's go back to what I talked about with President Trump's job and tax cut. That deregulations allowed so much money to come back. And by the way, whenever you put regulations into it, the consumer ends up paying for that at some point. It's just the way business works. If we can begin to take a look, new eyes on our construction and building industry, let's look at what can be done that has been building up over the decades of regulations that we don't need to have anymore and still be safe and have that cost come down, maybe even time come down, because we were at 55,000 homes short of where we need to be before the COVID hit. We can accomplish that if we take a good look and with new eyes. And that's really why we have to have someone who's not a career politician, guys. I'm a guy who just up until last year said, I would never, ever be a politician because I thought my answer would be in the free market. We get new eyes, and I'll say this also, there's a contingency across this country, about 23 other potential freshman Republicans. That team is full of patriots. Unlike those I think have come before us in both parties, see it as a career politician or a lobbyist. We're there to replicate a process we've seen in the last 4 years of America First. I think we can handle things like housing across the board, but of course I'll be working with those that represent here to make sure that anything that we can do to take away barriers from the federal level is done. As long as we have to get, again, the same end game to make sure there's a place of safety, do things like give incentives to businesses, for instance, when I talk about a bigger scale of doing more telecommuting. This has been a paradigm shift we've gone through that we can think so differently about everything we do. And I look forward to, again, being part of that conversation, to say the least.
Mr. Owens, I'm going to bang through 3 or 4 questions really quick.
Okay.
So if you can just make your answers a little bit succinct, we can get through a lot of issues that everyone wants to hear about. The very first one is immigration reform. This very Chamber of Commerce passed the Utah Compact, which was accepted broadly in our community, which made a real statement about the need for immigration reform. Unfortunately, not much has happened since we passed that compact. I think the ideals of that were exceptional, but we haven't seen anything delivered in Congress or by our president. What can we do to get immigration reform through? Is that a priority? Are you going to get it done?
Absolutely priority. And the first thing we need to do is make sure that Republicans have the House. Understand, we have not gotten a lot of things accomplished because in some minds, it is misery is a political tool to get power. We need to make sure that we have a visa reform where people come here, they're here to do their work, they can benefit, our businesses can benefit, and they go back home. So it's a win-win. So yes, I will commit to make sure that's a priority on my list of making that happen.
You would not be one of those Republicans like 2 years ago who didn't get it done when the Republicans did have the House.
Now, the problem we've had in the past, I'm going to call it what it is, we've had too many elitists on both sides of the aisle. We need to get people in there who's there to get the work done, do the heavy lifting, Social Security, healthcare, DACA, this
Right.
topic we're having now. This can be done by people who care and trying to get a solution and done with compassion, but done in a way that really help benefits us long term.
Thank you very much. Big priority for the business community.
Absolutely, it should be.
Minimum wage. What are your views in relationship to this? Do you support raising the minimum wage?
No, I don't, because I know what it's done to my community. You have to understand, we have a society in which we're competing for good labor, period. If we allow the continuation of this minimum wage to increase, what happens is our young people, unskilled labor, don't have a chance to ever get a start. It does help unions, because when you go too high, then it's more attractive to get skilled labor than getting labor can get started. I want to give this real quick point. 95% of the black boys in the state in Chicago were unemployed for about 8 years of Obama because of things like high minimum wage and lack of education. We cannot allow our young people to sit idly and not have a means to understand their value by giving and being meritocracy. What we get out of that, when we don't have the ability to work, is you get gains. You get the evaluation of life. We cannot let that happen.
Next topic, the deficit. Both the Democrats, when President Obama was in office, and now President Trump, they've both just heaped huge amounts onto our deficit. What's going to happen there? What is your position?
Well, it's dangerous for number one, not to be addressing it. Again, I'm going to go back to something that's pretty broad. We need to get a Congress that cares about these issues and not just keep kicking the can down the road. We need to get not career politicians who've been around forever and not really addressing it. But those who understand what it is being a free market, to know what it is to stay up late at night and not have the money to pay a bill and either going to lose your business or whatever's going to happen. We need to put that on in terms of our nation and where that goes. I believe that this new Congress with the House and the Senate and a president who understands how to run a business, we can finally put things in place that we don't have to give people an opportunity to put so much of a load of revenue or debt on their back. So that's unfortunate, the mix we've had to go through because we have a divided Congress.
Last topic for me here, stimulus. Right now, the House and the Senate are having a hard time coming together on this issue. There's a need, both agree, but they have different opinions of how much and what is the priority. What is the priority, in your opinion, for stimulus? When does it need to be passed?
Targeted. It should go to businesses that need it, not just as a broad brush. Instead of a shotgun, we need a rifle in terms of approach. We need to make sure that that particular small businesses are given that bridge they need. This was not depression. This was not recession. This was a suppression. It was us telling them to shut down. They need to be given an opportunity to get bridge out their way out of it. I understand what's going on right now, guys. It's happening because there are people in Congress who use misery as a political strategy. When people are hurting, people are losing their jobs, people are losing their businesses, people dying, there's a party that literally benefits from that, or they think they do. I think that that American people sees to that. And that's why we have to make sure the Republican Party is put in place to make sure things like this are covered and taken care of. And we get back to that hope, that vision of building businesses, having a life where our kids, that's the dream of the Republican Party with conservatism. We need to make sure we're fighting for that and give American people the hope that that the cavalry's on its way. Just to make sure they pull the right lever when it comes to November 3rd.
Couple other questions to wrap up, but you've mentioned several times just that the need for Congress to really want to get things done. I want you to expound on that just a little bit as we talk about bipartisanship or Congress's ability to actually get things done. What are the keys that are going to make that happen?
The key is recognizing that on both sides of the aisle are good people that love our country, and make sure we're collaborating and talking with those people. Unfortunately, there's another set of people that don't care about our country. We have to be honest about this. There are truly people who don't love our culture, and they'll do anything to destroy it and transform us into something else. First thing we have to do is make sure that the Republican Party gains control again. Once that happens, those good people in the Democratic Party will then have the ability to come and have these conversations without this iron hand, the iron fist is on top of them at all times. We can make things happen if we, the people, talk, just to make sure that the people are talking about our country's future, not about our country's demise.
You've referenced a few times that if the House turns Republican, we can get this done. Very, very few people have suggested that the House will turn Republican. Almost everyone agrees that it's going to stay Democratic. They're hopeful that the Senate will stay Republican, right? Many of the Republicans. So without that shift, how would you get things done as a minority in the House?
Well, it's going to make it a little more difficult. I'll just say this. I'm an eternal optimist. I don't know if you can pick up on that already, but I believe in the American people, period. And I have faith in the Utahns to do the right thing. We're at a point now we just cannot afford to go over the cliff and allowing socialists to actually take the lead now. I have faith in American people to do the right thing. This last year has had us give us a chance to see what that looks like. And I think it's going to be a benefit to us. In terms of if in case we lose, it's just doing our very best. You know, all we can do is our best. We reach out to those who feel the same way about our country. And in that case, we'll have to be more of a barrier to stop them from moving in that direction faster, because we know where they want to go. We know what the left wants to do with our country, whether it be taking the Second Amendment, whether it be, I mean, you go to the list of rights, and every single one they want to continue to delete and take away. So I would say we'll do our best. I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm an eternal optimist. We're going to get the House, keep the Senate, and our president will be 4 more years. So take it to the bank.
All right.
Thank you. We're going to give you just a couple minutes to wrap up here. Just if you could just leave us with your final statement to our members, what
Thank
they
you.
should be looking for.
Thank you so
in their
much.
congressman.
Please go to burgess4utah.com, the facts, please go there. This is what I'm so excited about being here. Number one, this district is between 1 and 3, a must have of both sides. The Democrats must have to keep their power in this chaos that we see across this country. Republicans must have to keep our country and our culture. How cool is it in a 250-year history of our nation that literally District 4 can be the linchpin for our nation? Based on what we do here, get our house back, our values can literally take our country back to the values that our country's been based on and built on. I think it's an honor, first of all, to be here, be a Utahn. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to fight to represent this great district. And I tell those vote our values and we get our country back. And I'm totally committed to make sure that happens.
Thank you. Appreciate our candidates taking the time to spend with you to make sure that we can understand these issues and understand them before casting our votes. We invite you to join us next week, next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, when we'll be hearing from the candidates in Utah's 3rd Congressional District. And until then, thank you.